What kind of management roles do you play?
Well, I play quite some roles. However, I report to the Vice President of Telecom Malaysia. He reports to the Chief Executive Officer. I have several people who report to me. Primarily, my responsibility is to manage sports assets in telecom as well as partnerships. Let's focus on the sports assets for today. We manage football, the local football league, the international partnership with Manchester United Football Club, and several others. I've just named you the key ones. Now, every year there are multiple activities that we do with them to be able to monetize and basically recoup our investment from those sports assets.
What kind of management skills do you use in managing your work and your team?
Well, there are several management skills, obviously, but I think the most important ones are really the basic ones, right? You need to be able to provide your team with a goal. So everybody needs to have a common goal, and that's why at the beginning of the year, what I do is I communicate what the plan is to the rest of the team. But let me go back a little bit. In July and August of any given year, we sit down and we come up with what we call a business plan. So in that business plan, we will come up with all the activities which we can then utilize to support the business. That is something we do in July. And then in September, we figure out how much money we're going to need, the budget that is required. Then there is the submission to what we call the Chief Financial Officer. He puts the entire picture together to see if everything that is needed to drive the business and the revenue goals for the next year is sufficient. Now, from there, what happens is we come up with an annual operating plan. So annual operating plan it's a fancy name, but all that it is a plan of how we are going to achieve those targets which we have already set. Yeah. So when it comes to annual operating plan, or we call it AOP for short, the best way to manage it is to break it up into quarters. So instead of looking at 12 months plan, we break it into half year, but most importantly, we break it into quarters. So there is a 3+3 plan, 3+6 plan, 3+9 plan, because then you are able to track. Okay, so that's just one of the skills, which is planning. And of course, there's no point planning if we don't track. So planning and tracking are key. Second thing is, of course, to communicate, to make sure that all the team members are clear as to what the goals are clear as to what the plans are. So the idea is to have everybody move in a cohesive manner towards the same goals. There's no point if everybody is working so hard, but they're moving in different directions, because then you don't achieve what you need to achieve, right? So communication is key. Whenever we have a big task, obviously we need to delegate, because I can't do everything. And you need to, it's always good for the people, for the team members to feel like they are being trusted with a leadership role, which means that delegation is also very, very important. So there's people management, there's also planning, there's people management, there is delegation, there is tracking, and of course the other thing is you will always run into issues and problems. There is no plan that will have no problems. So how do we come up with the solution? So the ability to address problem solving is very, very important. And last but not least is that when you're doing a big project, people will always get tired. People get very demotivated, they get frustrated. So it's always important to be able to motivate people also. So these are some of the skills that I use.
What about the plans you are involved in? Strategic, tactical, or operational?
So just now, like I mentioned, the things like business planning, that is very, very strategic. So very, very at the strategic level. And then when we sit down and do the AOP, that's a little bit, it is still strategy, but with already some operations mixed into it, because then we're talking about activation. Activation means it is a step between planning and execution. So you need to be able to look at what you have on the table. What are some of the things, in my case, what are some of the assets that I would like to activate to be able to deliver the goals that I have committed to in the business plan. So once that is done, then we have an execution plan. But at every stage there is a plan. There's an activation plan, because an activation plan tells you with this much budget that is allocated, what are some of the revenues that I can get. So what we call ROI, return of investment. And then from there, once you have that business plan and you know how you're going to activate, then the question is, how are you going to execute? How many ground events are you going to have, what we call ground controls? How many above the line campaigns am I going to do? So that one comes with what you call execution. So those are the 3 stages. You need to plan every stage. They don't always start in January and end in December. Some will roll over to 2021, and they don't always start and end at the same time. So there will always be overlaps. So it will be very, very interesting to be able to manage all of that. So I always refer to it a little bit like, well, if you watch the show Star Trek, so you know what the control room is like, right? And you've got that dashboard of all the different things that you need to see. But this campaign is moving ahead, it is meeting target, it is off target, and then that particular campaign is in trouble. Why? What are the problems? It can be daily problems, weekly problems, or it could be a simple thing of, 2 months into the project, we can see it's not working. Then maybe you just need to stop it altogether. So it's like a control room almost, and you need to be able to manage that.
What about the planning activities? Do you do on a daily basis or monthly or yearly?
Well, on a daily basis, I have what you call, well, just like anybody else, and it's a habit I started from the time I was really young, I think secondary school. Everybody has a to-do list, right? So that's daily. Weekly, I do a task list. So there's the list of tasks I want to achieve for the week. On a monthly basis, obviously, then the monthly is a breakdown of the quarterly, and the quarterly is a breakdown of the annual, right? So anybody can do that. That doesn't require any intelligence at all. But I find the key thing to having all these plans, this list, is the ability to track. You need to track, because there's no point having a list and not tracking it. When you track, you also have to be very honest with yourself, what is working and what is not. Because sometimes I have 116 things to do in my weekly list, and it's not going to get done, So I try and focus on 6 or 7 key things for the week, but what I do is I actually then tell myself which is priority. So prioritizing it helps a lot. And of course, you need to be very disciplined, because things that were on your list this week and does not get done, it gets carried forward to next week. And then it doesn't get done again, and you carry forward again for the 3rd week. So the discipline needs to come in. Now, why is it not getting done? Is it because you cannot do it? Is it because you need somebody else's help to do it? So you need to be very honest with yourself.
Such as a similar question, what about the organizing, leading, and controlling activities? What's that?
Sometimes people, my colleagues have told me that sometimes I do a bit too much of that. I have been called a dragon lady in some projects. It's important to follow up, because you need to keep to a time. However, it's also very, very important to remember that we work with people. So people have issues, they can get sick. They can have, their kids can get sick. lots of things, right? They can, their parents are in the hospital and they need to take time off. The important thing is to be able to manage that. So yes, you want to be a good leader and you want to be compassionate and allow them that time off, but you don't want to run away from your schedule. So you also want to make sure that your timelines are in place and that come end of this month, exactly all the things that needed to be done is done. The campaign that is going to roll out or by a certain date, because there is already invites to the press have gone out. There are multiple partners that are going to be flying into the country to attend this event. So obviously things need to be on time. So what I do is I always try and get people to always have what you call a schedule. So there is no one person that is basically there's no one person that needs to be there all the time, because nobody can be there all the time, right? A person should not be indispensable. So that also lies true for me, because obviously sometimes I need to be able to take time off, and work never gets done. So throughout the year, there will always be something that is going to go on. Telecom Malaysia doesn't close and say, okay, we're not in operations for this month because Farah is going to go on leave, or because the CEO is going on leave, or so that doesn't happen. So what do? You need to be able to make sure that in the event you need to step out for a week or 2 weeks, there is somebody else who can fill in your shoes. This can be different people at different stages of the project. So sometimes a project is still very much at the planning stages, still very much at, say, selecting who the partners should be, who are the participating vendors, the agencies. So that one, maybe you might require a different skill set. So maybe a different person can fill in for you. But it could be at the last final stages where you are preparing the event on ground, the size of the booth, the amount of lighting, whether or not your booth has sufficient PowerPoints, even things like that. Or it can be in the middle when it's about product, whether the product design is fitting to the campaign that you want to run, whether the product cycle is ready, because a product can be not, for it to come up as the final product, there has got to also be the people at the back who's ready. So when you buy the product, where is it going to get keyed in? What system does it go into? And even, let's say, after you buy the product and you want to turn it on, or you want to complain about it, there must be people who are able to take your complaints and answer your complaint. So you see, in those different stages, different people will fill in the shoes that I play to be able to manage the entire project. So it's not just like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Can you share a task or a situation that you were able to handle efficiently or effectively, or both? There are many, but
let's talk about one interesting one, which I think you might be somewhat familiar. In 2017, we had the Commonwealth Games. Yeah, so Commonwealth Games was a very, very big event for Telecom Malaysia, because we were the proud telecommunications sponsor for the KL 2017. Now, we were involved from the very beginning. That means even before 2017, when they were looking for partners and they needed to be able to put in infrastructure. In our case, it is connectivity, infrastructure into all the stadiums, into all the locations, the hotels. So we were already involved there. So that's already one big project. And then we were also very much involved in working with the National Sports Council to be able to ensure that there were athletes who needed funding and had funding, or athletes who needed certain type specialized training or special equipment, who had the ability to get them so that they can prepare properly. So it's about preparation and readiness of the athletes. And then we were also working with KBS, in this case Kementerian Belia dan Sukan, who are looking into the whole event of KL 2070, because obviously we invite the athletes as well as the supporters from all the Southeast Asian countries. So the ministry wanted to make sure that they put up a really good event, good show, we call it, so that everybody has a good time. So we work with them on that also. We need to make sure that Malaysians everywhere are aware of KL 2070. So the list goes on. Honestly, there are about 20 major projects around KL 2017. How we manage it? With a lot of people. I think we had hundreds. We had hundreds of people involved in KL 2017. I had peers, my peers and my colleagues, who managed different parts of the project. Obviously, it was a very big project. In the sense that we obviously had put in a lot of funds to support the project, but more importantly also because Malaysia is host to the SEA Games, we need to make sure that everything runs smoothly. We need to make sure that infrastructure put in is done correctly and done well. We need to make sure that athletes are ready, and there was a target for 120 gold, 120 medals. Then there needs to be readiness of athletes for 120 medals. So it was just so many different things. But the beauty of it all, I think, when it was done, and when finally everybody could breathe a sigh of relief, I think it was important for me that everybody that was involved in the project could actually sit down and say they learned something. They learned something, and that they had progressed as people, as a worker, as a team member, because that's the reason why we do all of this. If doing something means that you go through the trouble, because when you come out, you need to be able to know more than what you did before. Otherwise, there's no point doing it, right?
What are the challenges in the organization you face in planning your class?
Actually, it's a happy problem, that's what we call it. Because when we work in an organization, there's not just one of me. There are 10, 20, 30 of me. So everybody has got their own, what do we call, KPI, Key Performance Index, right? And everybody have got their plans, their deliverables. Now, when we are trying to deliver something and we have to work together, so what's really important to me could be less important to the next general manager, and what's important to them could be less important to me. But the challenge is to be able to get everybody on the same starting line to say, this is important for Telecom Malaysia. All of you need to prioritize it accordingly, and let's get moving at the point of, when we say get go means we go. So that is actually the challenge of a lot of big organizations. It's very different when you come from a smaller organization. Let's say you have a company of 20 people, and or 200 people even. And when the CEO says, okay guys, so at the end of this month, in 3 weeks time, we are going to close with a 5% growth. What do we need to do to close with a 5% growth? So we need to do this a bit more and this a bit more. Who's in charge? Now all the rest of you support these two people, and then it's easier. But when you have an organization of 24,000 people, it's a lot more complicated. But it can be done, and it is a challenge, but it can be done.
About the organization, how are the departments organized? Like just one department, or it's like combined?
Well, it's a huge organization, so I sit in business, which means basically for Telecom Malaysia, it means the retail business, which is Unify, right? So in Unify, there are people who handle marketing, there are people who handle analytics and big data, there are people who handle sales, delivery. When we say delivery here, it is, we're talking about the dealers, and there are people who handle, I mentioned marketing, so communications and PR. So there are, and product, of course. So basically the 4 Ps and then some. So where is it that I sit? Actually, I can play in any of those. So what I do is, depending on the project at hand, I can actually sit in different areas. But predominantly, I will be in marketing and comms.
Like, what are the departments? Do they combine to, if they have a big project, do the departments combine and?
Well, to tell you the truth, they don't combine simply because they also have big projects on their own. Telecom is a billion-dollar business, so that only can happen when everybody is involved in a big project and not necessarily one big project. So, for example, this year we are involved in the Olympics, of course, Olympics in Tokyo, right? Tokyo 2020. We are also involved in multiple projects, not as big as the Olympics, but there are many others. The football being one of them. So you can imagine that's important to me. There are people who are handling bigger projects, for example, the 5G project. So I'm also involved in the 5G project, but I don't lead that. So while I may lead a few big projects, somebody else, I only participate in those. So that one, my colleague will lead, and that colleague may be participating in my big project. So we don't combine, but we do work together. So we're very agile, actually. So agile style of management is not new. It is somewhat new in Malaysia, though. So in agile, what it does is it allows us to actually form a tribe. If let's say there's a big project which requires several teams, so what we do is we have a tribe to support this project, and to be able to deliver the tribe, we actually we come up with squads. So for example, let me give you just a rough example for KL 2017, right? So assuming KL 2017 is actually the tribe of people who needs to be involved in the KL 2017 project. So there are squads that will deliver different parts. So just now we mentioned about infrastructure in stadiums. So there'll be one squad to just ensure that, right? The readiness of that. There will be another squad to work with the National Sports Council on what are all the things that are needed by the athlete and the sports council. There will be another squad to work on marketing and comms, because obviously we want to have promotion when Telecom Malaysia is involved in the SEA Games. So these are all the different squads. Now every day, in fact, every day we get together in the morning and we talk about, okay, what are some of the issues and what is being done. And then the next day you come back again. You say, okay, so what's the progress from there? And that happens every day. It was every day, especially in the last 60 days of the project. We don't always meet every day. Most of the time, at the beginning of the project, when we're just only launching the project, we may meet every month, once a month, or then it becomes twice a month, and then once a week, twice a week, and then eventually it gets to that part when it's every single day.
Can you describe about the culture in the organization?
I want to say on the one hand, it's nice, but it's not enough. The word nice, I think, for us in Telecom Malaysia, people work like a family. So, as in families, people argue. You argue with your siblings, right? So that happens a lot in Telecom. We argue, but that's only in the meeting room. So we go, when we are talking about a particular project, and if we disagree, we will say. We argue, and and everybody puts their argument forward, and then and before we conclude, we say, okay, so who's got the best argument and why? What's the justification, and therefore what is the best way to move forward? Once that's agreed, and we walk out of the meeting room, then I can turn around and say, hey, that was you really took a lot of my energy. I'm hungry now. Let's go for lunch. We can do that. And that's what makes us like family, because it's not a fight and it's not personal. It's all professional. I say most organizations, obviously, not everybody is like that, but for the most part, we are. Now you talk about culture, very forward thinking. In Telecom Malaysia, people are they're very caring and they're very forward thinking. They want to progress and they want to be able to bring the company forward. I've been in several companies. I've been in Maxis, I've been in DG, and now I'm in Telecom. And I can say that Telecom competes just as well as the other telcos, if not bigger, because while Maxis is what we call a cell, so it's a mobile company, and so is DG, at least when it first started. Telecom Malaysia has always been about, it is a government-linked company, so it's always been about the nation. So nation building is very important to Telecom. The responsibility of Telecom is to be part of nation building. It is a little bit less about profit than it is about building a better Malaysia.
How does the decision making takes place in your organization, or can you define that?
Yeah.
How important your decision?
There are big decisions, obviously. Maybe I should put it this way.
What are the rules or procedures or acts that you have to follow?
We are all bound to ensure governance, and we do this by making sure that we abide by all the policies that have been presented to us. So for example, if we wanted to acquire a particular sports asset, there is a process to that. There are already actual steps that have been written out that we have to follow, and it is something that everybody does and they follow their processes to ensure that they don't break the rules, they don't do whatever that is against the company policy, and the ability to follow all these processes is what you call governance. So the important thing is, if you break the rules, let's say sometimes it's by accident, and there was a change in the rules and we did not know, so by accident a rule was broken, very, very important is that you highlight it. You highlight the saying that, oh, this happened, it is what you call non-compliance, and it shouldn't have happened, so I'm sorry, but what is it that we can do to mitigate the non-compliance?
How does the decision making take place in your organization?
Well, there are several types of decision. Let's go with the big one first. And big here, I mean if it involves a large amount of investment. So it could, if we talk about something that is, let's say, in tens of millions, then it may require the decision to be made at the board level. So the board of directors, the CEO and the CEO and the management team will bring the proposal up to the board, where it is discussed and debated and the decision is made there. If it is something that is a little bit smaller, then it will then be done at the management level. So management means all the key management individuals will sit down and they will debate and the pros and cons of going into or proceeding with that particular proposal, and then that decision is made. So and that's how it works all the way down to I'm sure my team members in their own teams will sit down and have a discussion with their own people and say, okay, for us to be able to do these things, and of course that amount can be a lot smaller. It may be 100,000 versus 25 million. So that's how the difference in the amount is what determines where the level of authority is. So there is a level of authority for 25,000, 100,000, 500,000, and so on and so forth. Yeah? So that's the difference between a big decision and a small decision.
What are the challenges you face in carrying out your tasks?
Believe it or not, my biggest problems have always been about people. Because while you can control the system, and while you can even take extra time to be able to do things on ground, readiness and so on, the one thing that you cannot control is people. So yes, people problems are the biggest problems.
How do you handle those challenges? People.
Nowadays, a lot of leaders, a lot of the leaders that we read about, and talk about management skill with a lot more focus now on people. Because before, management skill involves technical skills. Obviously, if you're a doctor, you have to go to medical school, get your technical skills, and then you can become a doctor. And then after that, and in the 80s, you learn about conceptual skills. In the 1980s, and people start talking about conceptual skills, the ability for a doctor not just to be able to do, but also to visualize, envision, so that they are then able to be a little bit more innovative and to be able to imagine, right? These days, though, it's not just enough to be technical and to be able to conceptualize, but these days it's also necessary to have what you call soft skills. So you need to be, and these soft skills are actually skills that will teach you to manage people. How do you bring out the best in people? And bringing out the best in a group of 10 can be very, very different from one person to the next. While one person may work better when let's say I take a more strict and disciplined position, another person may require, for me to coax them and to be able to sort of pujuk them, to come and try, try it this way, that may be quite good. But for some people, it's not even that. For some people, you almost just have to leave them alone and say, this is, because if you say, this is my way and this is the correct way, and they look at you and say, no, it's not. Because they don't take instructions very well. So for those people, you almost want to leave them alone and say, okay, you watch and learn, and at some point you will realize where is it that you can fit in and play a role. And those people, when they finally say, okay, I get it now, and this is where I can play the role, and I can play it really well, they tend to do that. They tend to play that role really, really well. So it's just different types of people. So yes, you need to be able to acquire people skills, but it's not so easy to do as it is to say, because people are come in different shapes, sizes, moods, and character. So you really have to know how to handle people. I think that's the most important thing about being a good manager.
Can I know about the flow of communication? Is it like direct or indirect, verbal?
In the industry that I am in, which is telecommunications, it needs to be direct. So while we also have indirect, most of the time, 90%, it has to be direct. It can be on email, it can be but these days it's even acceptable to be texting your bosses, because you need it to be done really quickly. Email used to be something which we must do in order to be able to send an instruction, but these days not anymore. Nowadays we can either WhatsApp, we can Telegram, we can whatever. But it's important to see how this has actually transitioned, because back in the 70s and 80s, if there's always this thing called inter-office memo, which is a physical piece of paper, you know, with the word memo type and on top. And that's how you send the instruction to people, or you receive the instruction from people. And then that very quickly went to notes. And then now we have got technology, so now we are able to just WhatsApp. In fact, nowadays you don't even have to type, you can just record your voice. Right? You just record your voice and say and give the instruction. It takes 3 seconds, and you know, in the next second, the other person has received it. So it's much faster.
For my last question, may I ask, in your view, what are the key qualities of a successful manager?
There was the ones that I mentioned earlier, the ability to plan, track the activities that are being done, the ability to make decisions, quick decisions, the ability to overcome whatever problems that you may have, and of course the ability to motivate your people. So those are some of the more obvious and important capabilities to have. But I also touched on people management, and I cannot stress on this more, because today there are so many young people, such as yourself, the millennials, you know, who are very, very expressive, very, very opinionated. They are very clear with what they like and what they don't like. They know what they want, and most of the time they don't want a lot of things. So how do you manage them? How do you bring out the best in them? So I think this is what requires a lot of time to be able to sit down with everyone, with the team member, team leaders, those who are in their 20s, such as yourself, and those who are not yet but coming soon, and even those who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and be able to still motivate them and bring out the best in them. Because, Irfan, let me just put it this way. When you've got dozens of people working to deliver a particular project towards a certain goal, and they are all doing the best that they can, simply because they enjoy it, you have got a very, very powerful team. None of them come in because they feel they are forced to. They come in because they love being with their peers, they love being with their colleagues. They come in because they look forward to the challenge that they are going to have, and they look forward to delivering that next milestone. So when you have those different groups, and everybody is wanting to achieve, that's a very, very powerful group of employees to have in a company. Which is why it has long been said that the most important asset in any organization are the people.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.